phatLiterature with hosts Natalie Handel and Gabrielle David at the Langston Hughes Library. Coming up next on phatLiterature, Professor novelist Mikhail Iossel discusses contemporary Russian literature featuring visual artist Anders Knutsson with a special dance sequence performed by Ty Kamiya. Funding for phatLiterature has been provided by the Langston Hughes Community Library and Cultural Center of the Queensborough Public Library and its funders. Additional funding for phatLiterature was also provided by the Intercultural Alliance of Artists and Scholars Incorporated and its funders. phatLiterature's website is made possible in part by Queens Council on the Arts, with support through J.P. Morgan Chase Arts and Culture Regrants program. With special thanks to our individual donors and viewers like you.
To be or not to be? That's not the question.
It's fact. It's fact. It's fact.
It's fact. It's literature. It's poetry. It's the spoken word. Diversity for all to hear. It's fact.
It's fact.
phatLiterature.
We have covered about 2 continents already of literature.
Oh, maybe even more, actually.
I know, I mean, we've had Dominican, we've had Chilean translating, we've had African-American poets, we've had...
Just about everyone, and it's very exciting. And we also have this fantastic artwork
by Anders Knutsson, who is Swedish.
Yes.
And one of the great things about Anders' work is that it's luminous painting and it glows in the dark. And hopefully during the duration of the show you'll get a chance to see some of that going on.
Yes, and experience that journey, which is just absolutely fabulous. And Lorraine Nuzzo, who's our art director and curator, we're very grateful to her to introduce us to all these artists, introduce you to all these artists as well. We have a very special guest today, Russian-American writer Mikhail Iossel, and we're delighted to have him.
We're into another continent.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
And when we'll be back, we will introduce Mikhail Iossel. We've known each other for quite a while now. We met in St. Petersburg in Russia, where you're originally from. And you've been in this country for a long time, and you've started this fantastic program, summer literary seminars in St. Petersburg, and I wanted you to tell us more about it and how it's evolved over the last few years.
Yeah, well, it started 6 years ago when you were there, and I'm from that city when it was called Leningrad, and after a few years in the United States, I decided that I wanted to have some of my friends, writers, American writers, to come to my hometown and see what it was like, and bring some American writers to meet Russian writers.
Sure.
So in other words, bring the 2 literatures together in a way. And it started out small, and it started out as a small boutique kind of program, and we didn't expect that it would grow the way it did, because it doubled in size. It pretty much doubled in size every subsequent year until we hit the ceiling of our capacity, and we're trying to expand now in terms of hotel space and so forth. But it's a big program. It's probably the 2nd largest and probably the most dynamic international literary conference in the United States right now. And
fantastic writers, and really the location in which it's happening, really in the center of...
Yeah, in the most interesting, the most dynamic part of St. Petersburg, in the very heart of the city, which is a fantastic city, as you know, one of the most fascinating cities in the world, and probably one of the most literary cities in Europe, probably 2nd after London, I suppose. And it lives and breathes literature, and it's a great place, and people go there for 2 weeks or for a month, and they get lost in the city, but lost in a familiar context surrounded by American writers.
Yeah.
And the program is premised on the notion that temporary displacement is good for one's writing, for one's life in general, but for writing in particular, because it stays with you. You just take yourself out of the context of your life, and you get back, and it provides you with a new perspective on your own life and your own writing, and gives you a new charge, new impetus for your writing.
Why do you suppose that it's become so popular? I mean, I've got to, when Natalie, suggested to have you on the program, and I, did research about, your program and whatnot, and I realized that this big proliferation of Russian literature across the board, in terms of many colleges are now offering it. And is it because the USSR is now fallen, because it's now available? Is it because for years we really didn't talk about Russian literature, Pushkin, one or two other names mentioned on the fly, and that's it. And now there's just this real interest. Can you just talk a little bit about why that's happening now, which is making a program so successful today?
Yeah, part of the reason why the program is successful because it's in this interesting place, because we, being independent, academically independent from all institutions, we pretty much are free to bring whichever writers we like, American writers, and so we bring writers that we genuinely enjoy and think they're some of the best American writers, and we also bring editors and agents, and because our participants, sometimes some of them are very high quality writers, and they meet editors and agents there. The reason why program is popular and Russian literature is popular because it's such a, in the 19th century, Russian literature was the literature. And Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Chekhov pretty much gave push to the literature into the 20th century. And then for the whole century, Russia was a closed society. It was Soviet Union and pretty much, impenetrable for the rest of the world. And now it's opened up, and of course there is a certain Russian fascination about this country. It's the largest country in the world in terms of its sheer size, and it's filled with interesting writers, interesting people in general.
I just want to ask, is there any writers during that closed period of time, were they able to publish and write and are now coming out, or is there a void because of that 100 years of the Soviet Union?
Well, there were great writers, and some of them are known in this country. Some of them are the greatest writers of the 20th century, like short story writers like Isaac Babel, or poets like Mandelstam and Pasternak. And some of them, Pasternak, for instance, got Nobel Prize in Literature in 1958, but had to turn it down because the Soviet government wouldn't let him accept it. But you're right in that sense that a couple generations, last generations of the Soviet Union spent their lives writing in the underground, as it were. There was a word for it, samizdat literature, self-publishing literature, literature that evolved essentially, as famous Dostoevsky novels called Notes from the Underground, in the underground. There was no way to publish officially at all. But people still want to write, and they pretty much took themselves out of the mainstream of life. They worked night shifts as night guards or boiler room operators. I belong to that culture also, but I emigrated to the United States in the beginning of the perestroika, when Gorbachev came to power in mid-80s. But some people who had spent their whole lives in this culture of the underground had serious difficulty adjusting to the new openness, because it's like people spend, if you spend too much time under the surface of the sea, you'll develop a bends, there's too much oxygen, so lots of people could not adjust to that.